have a Cub Cadet LT1024 with the Briggs & Stratton 24 horsepower motor. It's a 2004 model. When you go to start it, it's having trouble turning over the compression cycle, and I'm getting a lot of sputtering and out of the exhaust. Alright, I pulled my valve covers off and my spark plugs out so I can troubleshoot my issues here. You want to pull the spark plugs out so that you can actually turn over the engine by hand, otherwise you'll get compression and it'll make it really difficult to turn over. So this is my intake, this is my exhaust valve, and I'm just going to turn the engine around and see what they're doing. So right now I'm on my intake stroke. I don't know if you could see it in the camera, but the intake valve just dropped, and that's as far down as it's going to go. Come back up, and then the exhaust should open and close. There you go. And you can see how much further the exhaust dropped down than the intake. That's how far the intake should be dropping down. It looks like my intake's having an issue opening. So what I did to check it is what you can do is make sure it's tight on there, make sure the rod isn't bent. You need a T40 bit to open or to add pressure. Alright, and a 13mm wrench to loosen the bolt here so that you can actually adjust the pressure on your rockers. Then you can adjust your rocker pressure up and down to make sure that it's not just a loose rocker. I did that already. It's not a loose rocker. So what I determined that is probably the cam. One of the lobes is probably worn down, so I'm going to replace the cam. To change out the camshaft, I'm going to have to remove the engine. So I'm going to start by removing the wiring harnesses here, removing the connection to the starter, removing the choke, removing the throttle, and removing this pan right here, the heat guard for the exhaust. There's a bolt here and there's a bolt right here for it. Alright, so underneath I'm going to remove the pulley assembly, and then I'm going to remove the 4 bolts that mount the engine to the frame. One bolt is right here. You got to actually turn the wheels to get the steering gear out of the way to get to it. The other bolt, turn the wheels the other way. It's right here. And then there's 2 more bolts in the front. One's right here and one's right here. This pulley has a 5/8 inch bolt holding it in place. The problem is when you turn that bolt, the whole crankshaft turns. So to loosen up or to break this bolt, what I'm going to do is come up here. There's a hole right there. I'm just going to stick this screwdriver in it, then break the bolt underneath. The engine's out. As you can see, there's a pretty thick layer of oil on the bottom side of the engine. That's a pretty good sign that the main seal right underneath this pulley has been leaking. If you haven't already done it, before you start this process, make sure that you take all the oil out of the engine. Otherwise you're going to have a mess. These are the items that I got for the camshaft replacement: the gasket, which came with bolts, the main seal, the camshaft, which came with tappets, and assembly lube for the camshaft. The gasket and the camshaft both came with instructions. I'll throw the instructions up on the screen. Along with these items, you'll need your basic maintenance items such as oil filter, that kind of stuff. The one item that I don't have pictured here is the engine pulley, which had to be destroyed to be removed. That is ordered and en route. With all these parts, I use a website I will post for the part numbers. I'll post it in the description. Well, that escalated quickly. So now that I got the pulley off, I'm going to take the sump off. But before I take the sump off, I'm going to mark the governor right here so that I know where to put it back into place. So we're just about ready to pull the cam out. Before we do, you want to make sure you set up your alignment marks. I'm also probably going to have to pull out the valve covers and loosen the springs so that the cam's easier to come out. to take a minute and show you what the issue was with this old camshaft. As you can see, the second lobe on the right, as I twist it around, you see all the other lobes have a lobe, like a teardrop shape to them. The second one on the right has barely anything. It's almost all the way rounded out, so that valve was just not opening. See, that's that teardrop shape you're supposed to have. Alright, once you get your push rods back in place on top of the tap, you got to preload these rockers. And to do that, you're going to make sure that the tappet is sitting on the low spot on the lobe on the camshaft, and then you're just going to tighten this down to where there's minimum wiggle.